This is the Nations Conspire channel. Welcome to today's show. If you haven't heard this story about a New Orleans prison break, it's important to pay attention to it because, as most of you know, the news is not there to inform you of ridiculous stories like this. It is there to condition you into change. It is there to get you to agree with the things the government has planned. And one of the things, of course, we see going on right now is the destruction of infrastructure to bring in AI infrastructure. And that includes prisons. There's a lot of new prison reform that's going to go on in regards to artificial intelligence, including, of course, the technology used at these prison facilities, which will not involve human beings being involved. Remember, the plan is to enslave us and imprison us with this technology. So prison guards, sure, there'll be a few on hand. But overall, what they do with these stories is they try to convince you that the prison system is failing, that reform is failing, which has been one of the narratives that's out there about repeat offenders who continually get let out of prison by the prison system, done by design, likely being paid off by the government themselves to go and commit more crimes, telling them, hey, you'll just get a slap on the wrist. Go rob Macy's. Go rob Nordstrom's. We'll arrest you again. Then we'll let you out in a few days and go do it again and again and again. So we get people to want and demand change because all people see is chaos going on around them. Now, this New Orleans prison story is so deliberately done. It's laughable at how comical this story is if you haven't seen it yet. All of these prison guards who happen to be in on the plan, who benefited zero from letting prisoners out of jail. Why would these prison guards let all of these prisoners leave, knowing there's security cameras, knowing that they'll be able to see and figure out how this entire operation was done? But of course, we're supposed to believe that the prison guards were in on it. They let all these guys escape for no reason whatsoever, with no motive behind it. They even give you this picture that they're putting out there of how the prisoners escaped through a wall behind a toilet where they wrote with a crayon, "Too easy, LOL." Why? Because what does that make people think when they see a photo like that? Wow, it's that easy to escape prison? We better change the entire prison system. In fact, we better bring in more technology and less human beings because human beings can be manipulated. Human beings are bad people. They're letting people out of jail. And in fact, the system itself with brick walls isn't enough to keep the prisoners in. We're going to need smart locks. We're going to need full-on facial recognition surveillance all over the place. And this is why they put photos like this out there. We're supposed to believe that these 9 prisoners that were let out by the prison guards decided before they left and went through the wall that they were going to use a crayon to draw a smiley face with a tongue sticking out and then write "Too easy, LOL" underneath it, only so that the national news could show us this clip every single day so that they can do what? Convince people out there that change is needed. It's basic problem, reaction, solution. Here's the story for anybody out there that hasn't seen it yet.
To New Orleans now, and a demand for answers following the escape of 10 hardened criminals. Surveillance video at the jail captured the brazen breach. CBS's Katie Weiss is in New Orleans with the latest. It almost sounds like something out of a movie, Katie.
Oh, absolutely, Jerika. Good evening. That's definitely a way to characterize what happened here. That escape now has hundreds of officers searching even across state lines on an exhaustive manhunt.
Heads need to roll.
Outrage is growing in New Orleans after 10 inmates made a daring prison break early Friday morning. They managed to break through a cell wall by removing a toilet, leading them to a loading dock and freedom. It was 7 hours before anyone noticed they were gone. No deputy was on duty. Only a civilian employee was there at the time.
When she stepped away to grab food, that is when they began their attempts to escape.
3 prison guards have now been suspended. New Orleans City Councilman Oliver Thomas.
And I think the sheriff should lead in making sure that people are prosecuted who were negligent or complicit or in cooperation with the folk who escaped.
The inmates wrote taunting parting messages, including "Too easy, LOL."
They were then observed scaling the fence using blankets to avoid being cut by the barbed wire.
Governor Jeff Landry posting on social media, quote, 3 down, 7 to go. Lock them up. State police captured Robert Moody, Kendall Miles, and Dekenan Dennis, and today used a helicopter to bring them to another Louisiana prison.
Our number one mission, despite anything else right now, is to get these people in custody.
And even though this prison was rebuilt in 2015, the sheriff's office is also pointing blame on the city for failing to pay for what they say were needed fixes to faulty locks. Jerika?
Katie Weiss in New Orleans, thank you.
So the story's a bit comical, and of course, when a lot of people hear me talk about these things being formulated by the government, they have a tough time wrapping their heads around how people could network. Oh, so these people were in on it? Well, not necessarily. They didn't need to be in on it. They could have just been told, hey, there's going to be a prison break tonight. You want to join in on the prison break tonight? Or in fact, they could say, hey, we want you to run out of this gate tonight. Okay, we're going to have a little opening behind a toilet. You could run out and be free, and then we'll rearrest you, and then we'll relocate you somewhere better with better facilities, maybe get your own little room, and we'll reward you within the prison system. Just do as we say. Because they all network through secret societies. We know that the police are run through the Fraternal Order of Police, which is a Freemasonic group. It's right in their logo, even the Masonic handshake, and that all-seeing eye that you see on the back of the dollar bills, right in the Fraternal Order of the Police, is logo, who of course is fully supported by Donald Trump, because why wouldn't they be? Because they're all working together, and this is how they contrive, this is how they conspire to convince you that change is needed. So this isn't the only story out there, and this is another thing I tell people out there to do if you're new to this stuff, or just if you want to just start thinking when you hear a story, is this legit? Is there something bigger to this story? It's just start seeing how many stories are out there about the topic. You start looking up prison breaks, right? There's a bunch of stories about prison breaks. Obviously, this is the big one they're talking about, but there's other prison breaks going on. A cop who was convicted of a ridiculous act and murder escaped prison. Now he's on the loose, and they continually are putting these stories out there so that they can put these stories out there where they say, how do prison breaks happen? Staffing shortages, old facilities, nothing to lose. Does that sound familiar? Let's start with staffing shortages, old facilities, old infrastructure, right? Think about what I've been covering since the beginning of this year with air traffic control. How many stories did they put out there? How many things did they do? How many false flags and psyops did they create? To get what? To get people afraid to fly, yes, but to get people to be okay with the changes that are going to come, which are autonomous planes, because human error is involved. They're hiring people based on skin color and gender, making people fearful of flying, but they trust their phone that's in their pocket. So then they'll be likely to trust the artificial intelligence that's flying the plane instead of trusting their neighbor who might have a different sexual preference than they do, and they don't want them to be the person responsible for the air traffic control because they believe they're getting hired based on that and not on qualifications, right? So the stories continue to come out almost every day on the air traffic controllers. Human air traffic controllers keep fire safe. Should AI have a role? Air traffic controllers could use an AI wingman. They're conditioning you into what they want, which is the removal of humans to be replaced with AI. And they're getting people fully convinced that this is for their benefit, that this is what we need, and this is the direction that we need to go. Now think about the prison systems. Think about all the movies you've probably seen in your entire life that have revolved around futuristic prison systems, right? Where they're advanced with technology, they're dystopian facilities. We have, extreme control systems, surveillance systems, brutal punishment systems. That's the future of what prisons will look like. Now, of course, people out there say, that's great. We need that. We need more futuristic prisons, right? But eventually these prisons aren't going to be used for actual criminals. They're going to be used for people who are going against the state, who speak out against the communist regime, who speak out against the corrupt tyranny that's going on. They're not going to be used for criminals who rob the grocery store or who go into Nordstrom's and raid the panty section. That's not what it's going to be used for. It's going to be used for the rest of us. It's going to be used for Christian persecution. It's going to be used for people out there who wake up and start disagreeing with the state. And again, one of the things when you see and you think about all of these futuristic prison films that we've seen where it's fully run on technology is also movies like Clockwork Orange, where we're talking about full-on reformation, right, of prisoners. Remember that video I did a year or two ago on the AI prison of the future? And the story about Cognify, the company Cognify, was pretty much showing you what the World Economic Forum's plan is, implanting memories and using AI to reform the mind, to remold the mind of prisoners, and especially repeat offenders, repeat prisoners. AI-based prison concept would complete sentences in just minutes. AI-generated memories would force inmates to experience their crime. Experience would feel like years for subjects, minutes in real time. This is a concept that's been developed and talked about going back to the World Economic Forum. Of course it is, because if you look at any of these stories that are out there, if you look at prison breaks, and then you start to go, okay, what's the deal with prison breaks? Are they making up prison breaks? Are they trying to create prison breaks? Why would they try to do that? And you think to yourself, if they want to control everything through AI, then they have to tear down the walls of everything and destroy every infrastructure there is and rebuild it with full-on artificial intelligence under control and algorithms doing all of the work for them. No one thinks about the man behind the curtain, but these would be the psychopaths behind the curtain who are in control of the technology that'll be used to enslave the rest of us. So the World Economic Forum, prisons are failing. It's time to find an alternative. You can go through articles that they've done over the last decade or so. How do we move to a new paradigm for delivering punishment? Technological advances could help us make some of these changes more efficient. Bringing 21st century digital tools into the public sector would enable often siloed government departments to communicate, share data, and recognize patterns through artificial intelligence. And if you just continue to look, you'll see article after article after article from all countries around the earth, smart prisons and the future of dynamic security with AI. Right? China, Hong Kong, AI-powered surveillance systems being used to monitor inmates, monitor everything that they're doing, movement, saying, thinking. Smart prisons aim to track inmate behavior, detect anomalies, improve safety and rehabilitation. However, of course, privacy concerns are raised, but we know this is a world without privacy. We already don't have privacy. They pretend like, well, there's still you still have your privacy because you're allowed to talk about these things, Nations Conspire, on YouTube, and you're allowed to talk about it on your website, and we'll pretend that we're not listening and monitoring you, even though we're getting ready to release our AI firewall, which is something else I'll cover in a separate video very soon, where we'll be able to just stop videos from going up that have certain words in them. We'll be able to stop communication via email or via text message that say certain things that we don't want you talking about. And again, this all goes back to AI governance and the AI Governance Alliance, which is why I've been warning for a long time about what the core message is at the World Economic Forum, what the core message is at the United Nations. When these guys meet and they talk, yes, most people only hear the things about gender equality and about how we're going to eat bugs and be happy and you'll own nothing and be happy. But people seem to miss the punchline there, that the entire thing is based off of AI governance. And the only way to bring all that stuff in is to bring in an AI governance infrastructure, which is why I've been warning about Donald Trump, but most people don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it because they're just thrilled that they're not hearing stories anymore, not seeing trans parties happening on the White House lawn that the Democrats were doing to get everybody riled up so that they would eventually just support whatever Donald Trump does as long as it doesn't sound insane, because they can't grasp what AI governance is. This is the enslavement grid. This is what countries are bringing in together. I talked about the Golden Dome and what that's going to be like and how they're going to trick you into thinking that it's about missile defense system. They are bringing in AI governance. And unfortunately, most of the sheeple will hear stories about air traffic control and they'll say, oh, I don't care if it's run by artificial intelligence. I trust that more than I would trust my next door neighbor or trust somebody who's hired because they're black or Hispanic or white or whatever they decide to do to hire somebody. I'd rather have artificial intelligence do it. In fact, I'd rather get in an autonomous plane than have some pilot who is a DEI hire, right? All done by design. And those people will dismiss it and they'll go along with it. And that's why they're putting those stories out there. And then every other day, they're just conditioning you with, hey, what is the answer? All of a sudden, nobody wants to work in air traffic control. There's shortages, right? Oh, how convenient that the same exact headlines are out there when it comes to these prison breaks. Jail security train wreck, lack of employees, lack of prison guards is the latest. And nobody wants to be a prison guard anymore. How convenient when you know that all they've been talking about is how we need to change over the prison system, how we need to change over air traffic control, that all this stuff is going to run through 6G technology. It's all going to be part of AI governance. And it's not a beneficial thing because these prisons are not going to be used for what you think they're going to be used for. They're not going to be used because, oh, that's going to protect you from some guy coming and robbing you at your home in the night. They're going to be used for people who speak out against the state. That's what they're going to be used for. They're the ones who let criminals run amok. There's a reason that all of a sudden, all these stories constantly come out of people robbing homes and the police don't show up in time, and how all this time everyone's scared and everyone's afraid at night because all these people are allowed to run free and the Democrats let all these people out of prison and all these people are crossing the border. It's all by design, and they want you to think that this enhancement, bringing back Alcatraz, or anything, bring back a smart Alcatraz, and all these stories are to make you sleep better at night and feel better at night. But it's to imprison us, because the real enemy of the state is going to change. We've seen how they've been evolving that over time recently. Who have they created as the image of an enemy of the state? Conservatives, MAGA, Christians, nationalists, whites. Those are the things that they're implanting in people's minds while they're doing this stuff. But most people are too blind to realize that, when you look at China's government, all these, the surveillance state over there is to imprison the citizens. It's not to protect the citizens from crime. It's for them to monitor and listen to anybody that's going to try to take power or control away from them. Anybody that might rise up against this control system that's literally monitoring every breath that every citizen is taking. And most of them over there, because of behavioral control, have complied to it. They just started going, it's great for all of us. And they smile as they get tasered in the rectum. And they like it. And that's eventually what they're going to do here. That's the point of this AI prison grid. So when you think about changing the prison, most people are just going to go, oh, that's great. We do need to change it, right? Because that image I showed you earlier, ooh, too easy. We just broke out of the jail, right? We just went through a hole in the wall that doesn't even look like a person could fit through it, right? And they just take a picture, they put that out for everyone to see, and everyone's just like, oh man, 9 prisoners all just ran through, right? And then what did they all do? Did they all wait next to one another outside and then all sprint at the same time? Because the images that we see is all of them running and celebrating together. A lot of the people don't look like they could actually fit through the crack. Nobody asked questions about that. Nobody said, hey, did they just open the back door and let them out and say, look, just go and do this, run amok, we'll reward you. No different than when prisoners make deals in other situations, right? Prisoners ratting out prisoners to get reduced sentences or to get, switching their cells into a nicer cell or a nicer prison. No different than that. How would you ever know? You think they'd air that on the news? That's what most people think. They're like, oh, if that was happening, then the prisoners would come forward and we'd find out about it. No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't, because the same people who conspire and do these things are the same people who control the media. And that would never get out in the first place. It would never be allowed to get out. Real secrets don't get out. The only ones that get out are the ones they want out there, like Epstein's Island and his list. They want those things out there. They're formulated conspiracies that they create to send you down rabbit holes that don't actually exist or to lead you in the wrong direction. That's what the government does. So, you look at the stories and, you wonder if people use common sense. You see the story, okay, and then people go, wow, look at all these guys they prison break. And they talk about it every day. And they talk about how, the prison guards were involved. The other prison guards, how many people were involved in letting them out? All these people were just involved. None of them were like, you know what? I don't need to go to jail for 50 years to let some inmate out that I don't even know. Why would they let them out? What's the benefit of it? None whatsoever. But what you're saying, they're just like, whatever, screw the system. Yeah, we're just going to let them all out. And, we'll deal with the consequence. I won't worry about getting caught. And then what? The prison guard not only loses their job, they go to jail for a long, long time. Right? Yeah, I'm sure it was worth the risk. And then, of course, somebody was like, hey, when we go through this crack in the wall that we can't fit through, leave us a Crayola crayon so that we could draw 2 easy LOL. So that the prison guards could take pictures of it and put it on the national news so that people out there see it and then they go, wow, it's that easy to break out of jail. We better have a way more secure system. How about smart technology? How about all this technology? How about all this technology we're letting in our home? We'll just have it even more enhanced in a prison, right? They'll make it like Judge Dredd, We'll make a futuristic, ooh, that sounds wonderful and great. They tear down the system, they build it back up, and then all of a sudden you realize, hey, wait a minute. These prisons aren't for these guys who are out there looting or doing all these heinous crimes. They're actually just for people who are freely thinking, who are questioning the state, who are demanding that the people rise up against tyranny. Oopsie daisy. And look what happened here. They're all locked in and they're all, people out there don't think that far in advance because they don't want to believe that that's what we're headed towards. But it is. It's exactly what we're headed towards. Look at China. Look at these communist countries. That's what we're headed towards. And AI governance is what it's all based on. So all these stories out there, including the rehabilitation through AI prisons, they've been out there. They've been circulating. They tell you about these stories. When you hear these stories, just start looking into it and say to yourself, okay, this looks a little suspicious. I mean, how people didn't see this, look at this story and say it looks a little suspicious is beyond me. But at this point, we know most people are on autopilot. Most people don't see problem, reaction, solution. They don't see how these stories get created so that they think a certain way and then want change or want this to happen. That's the whole purpose of the news. That's how they get you on board with imprisoning yourself, by thinking that the world's a scary place and all these things are happening and we need the change. Otherwise, if they just came in and said, hey, we're going to tear down all these prisons, your tax money's going to pay for it, and we're going to put in smart prisons. People go, why would we do that? What's the purpose of it? These prisons seem to be working. Well, they got to convince you that they don't work. They got to convince you it's dangerous. They got to convince you all these prisoners are running around the streets and your life could be in danger. Then you go, okay, let's change it, right? Then they got to convince you that planes are flying into one another. Because how would you get people to get on board with getting on an airplane that's an autonomous plane? Tell me that 5 years ago if I said, hey, there's no pilot on the plane, right? People would be like, what? There's no pilot? They probably jump out the window or try to. Their heads would explode like scanners. But now when they hear these stories about planes colliding, planes falling out of the sky into the streets every single day. Oh, and then they start hearing about autonomous planes. They start hearing about the Olympics and the autonomous planes that are coming. They start hearing about air traffic control run through AI. And then all of a sudden you'll hear conveniently how there's no more accidents in the sky and how it's 100% success rate and everything's operating much, much smoother and everyone will smile. And nobody will think for 1 second that they got duped into it. And then they'll go, well, what's the big deal? This is better for all of us. When all they're doing is removing human beings and replacing them with AI. And then you don't know who's behind the curtain controlling the AI. And eventually the AI is going to turn on you, as they've told you 1 trillion times through predictive programming from every single movie about artificial intelligence that there possibly is. Eventually, they're going to turn it on you. You're just not going to see it just yet. So I thought that was one of the funnier stories I've seen in a while. There is no doubt that this is a contrived government operation. You're going to start hearing more and more about prison reform change with AI. You'll probably hear Trump talking about it. Yes, smart prisons and more technology and more surveillance and those types of things. And of course, the more people just hear these types of stories, the more they'll agree to it happening. But you got prisoners drawing on walls. I mean, you can't make it up. You can't make it up. Nobody just goes, hey, what are the people thinking involved? Why are the prison guards doing it? Okay. And even if they throw you a motive, it's not going to be a good enough motive to make you, nobody out there should be believing it because it would make no sense because none of it makes sense. We can look at it, we can say there's a lot of dumb people out there. Okay, so the prison guard, what is his motive? Is he having an affair with the 10 men? Or the prison guards all having, big, orgies together at night? They're all in love with one another? I mean, there's people who wouldn't risk going to jail for 20 years for their spouse or their kids. And these guys are like, yeah, let's let all the prisoners out. There won't be cameras or surveillance here in the jail to find out that we actually let them out, right? And we won't be held accountable. What will we get? A slap on? Will we lose our jobs? All right, I don't like my job anyway. Wait, I got to go to jail for 50 years? Yeah. Oh, right. So then you believe a story like this? You believe how they show you the image of them all sprinting together? And then for days keep people in fear about how they're running in the streets. Oh, they're down by Mardi Gras. Oh, my goodness. There's a very populated area. Everybody stay inside, right? I mean, the psyops are weaker and weaker by the day, but the human mind is getting softer and softer. Nobody's seeing stuff and thinking about it anymore. And then they could just make up every news story and make it so ridiculous. So ridiculous when they show you images of LOL, so easy to get out, that people actually think this stuff is real. You might as well have the Cookie Monster standing next to that hole behind the wall, smiling, eating a cookie. And people go, wow, the Cookie Monster was in on it too. And they wouldn't even think, wait a minute, the Cookie Monster's there. They would be like, that's great. Good to see you. Good to see him. Was Ronald McDonald there too? Yeah, Ronald McDonald's the one carrying out the operation, your government. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.